Welcome back. Welcome back. Hello, hello, hello. Happy Tuesday. How are y'all doing on this a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day? Thanks so much for popping in. As you are coming in, let me know where you're from. Where are you watching from? Where are you listening from? Thanks so much for joining. Today, I want to get into it. This might feel a little bit beginner for some folks, but I think sometimes it's important for us to start at the beginning, right? And I want to talk specifically about how to know which coaching niche is right for you. How to know which coaching niche is right for you. This is Strategy Tuesday. So I'm going to invite you to go ahead and get your notebooks and your pens or whatever it is that you write notes on. Pop open a notes app on your phone because we're going to be getting into it. We are going to be getting into it, particularly on Strategy Tuesday, right? You're going to leave here with some practical strategies that you can implement on your own to help you move along or get started in your coaching business. Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for joining. As you are coming in, let me know where you are calling from, where you're calling from, like old school radio, where you're watching from, where you're listening from. Today, on Nick at Noon, we're going to be talking about how to know which coaching niche is right for you because there's a moment that happens for almost every single woman who starts thinking about coaching as a real path to start to edit her income. And when she starts considering this as not just an idea or something that she's considered in passing, but something she's truly trying to build, what happens is it's not usually a loud moment. It's not usually a very obvious moment. And it usually doesn't feel like this big turning point. What usually happens is that it sounds more like a quiet question that keeps coming back to her, even after she's tried to answer it a few different ways. And that question is, what would I even coach on? And that question, it actually has a way of lingering. If you're like me, you might journal about it. You might talk through it with your family and friends. You might even revisit what would I even coach on after you've watched somebody else's content and still you don't feel settled about it. And what's interesting about it is that question rarely comes from a lack of skills. It comes from, honestly, it comes from a lack of clarity around your own value. It comes from a lack of clarity around your own value because the woman asking that question can sit in a conversation with someone for a whole hour and sometimes longer and help them think through something they've been stuck on, offer their perspective, and it shifts how that person they're speaking to, it shifts how they see a situation. But then that woman who gave the perspective, who gave the solution, she'll walk away from that conversation as if it didn't count. Thanks so much for joining on YouTube. She'll walk away from that situation and that conversation as if it didn't count, like it wasn't something, like it was nothing. And to me, that is really the disconnect. And let me be honest, because that situation that I just described, that is more common than many people think. So, welcome back to Nick at Noon. My name is Nick Scott. I'm a business coach and brand strategist who helps women use their existing skills to build sustainable online businesses without quitting their 9 to 5, without the hustle, without the burnout, and without the overwhelm. As I said earlier, today is Strategy Tuesday. And if you haven't already, go get your notebooks and your pens because we are about to get into it. I'm going to be giving you the 4 places you should be looking for clues and context around what your niche is. And I'm going to be explaining how these 4 things aren't just isolated strengths for you. but they're intersections when you're landing on what exactly your coaching niche is. Because the fact is, you probably don't have a niche problem. You probably have a clarity problem, and clarity is different from confidence. And I want you to write that down if you're taking notes, because often those two get confused. Clarity is different from confidence. And let me explain what I mean by that. Clarity is being able to see what you already bring to the table in a way that's structured, specific, and transferable to someone else. And I think that last part, that's the part that a lot of us miss, right? We understand that clarity is structured. We definitely understand that clarity is specific, but we don't always think about clarity in a way that it is something that we've already have, that we already bring to the table, and as something that is transferable to someone else. We don't always look at it that way, because until you can see it clearly, you can't communicate clearly. And if you can't communicate it clearly, it doesn't matter how capable you are. It doesn't matter how many skills you have. It doesn't matter how deep your expertise or your experience is. If you cannot communicate it clearly, people will not know that they want to work with you. They won't know how to work with you. They'll be left more confused than anything. So, if you've been in a space where you feel like you have something, like you have something to give, you can help people, but you can't quite name it, you can't quite shape it, you can't quite position it, this is where I would ask, if you were my client, I would ask you to slow down and really take a deep, hard look at what's already there. Take a deep, hard look at what's already there. Thanks so much for joining on YouTube. And I mean, when I say take a deep, hard look at what's already there, I don't mean in a vague, everybody has value kind of way, but in a real, observable way. Because your niche is not something that you go out and find. And I know it, if you've been in this space, or if you've been flirting with the idea of getting into coaching, it kind of feels like your niche is something that you go out and find. And I just don't approach it that way. I believe that your niche is something you recognize once you truly know and understand what you're looking at. So I want to shift how I want to shift this conversation altogether. I want to shift how you've been looking at this, and I want to shift how your niche is not what you want to talk about. Like, it's not just what you want to talk about. It's about what you can move someone through. And that distinctions, hush, baby. Sorry, my dog is she's back here barking, and I like to get into my groove and flow. So I want to talk. I want to shift how you might be thinking about this. Your niche is not about what you want to talk about, right? So it's not just, well, I want to talk about female entrepreneurship and helping entrepreneurs and women leverage their skills to create online businesses. That's what I want to talk about. That's not what your niche is. Your niche is about what you can literally move someone through. How you can take someone from problem to solution. And that distinction matters more than most women realize. Because when you're focused on just simply what you want to talk about, you really stay centered on yourself. It's a really self-centered approach in selecting your niche, because you're focused on your interests. You're focused on your preferences. You're focused on what feels good for you to say. But when you shift to what you can move someone through, your attention and your intention, it changes. Because now you're thinking about outcomes. right? You're thinking about movement, you're thinking about transformation. So your niche isn't what you like to talk about. Your niche is where you can create change and where you can create that change clearly, consistently, and in a way that someone else can see it and recognize it as value. Does that make sense? And here's where it gets even more important, as far as I'm concerned. A clear niche doesn't limit you. It makes you legible. It makes you easier to read. It makes you easier to understand. It makes it easier for the right person to hear you and immediately think, what she's talking about, I know that is for me. Because if other people can't see themselves in what you do, they will not stay long enough to even understand it. So I'm going to say that one more time. A clear niche, it doesn't limit you. It makes you legible. And that's the part, this right here is where I see a lot of women get frustrated. They start thinking that their problem is visibility, or that they need to post more or show up more or try harder or stay up longer, or, that whole hustle culture. But if your positioning isn't clear, more visibility, it just amplifies that confusion. It amplifies that lack of clarity. So before you worry about showing up and being seen and being visible, you need to make sure that what you're saying can be clearly understood by the people and the person that you need to be understood by. Okay? Now, here's what I really want, where I really want to get into this, because there are two common directions that women go when they're trying to figure out their niche. And the first direction, and this is by far the most popular direction, and it's very internal, but it is very vague. And that is follow your passion. That is always the first direction that women who want to get into coaching, or women that want to build an income on the side along their 9 to 5, it's like, okay, you know what? I'm not really passionate about what the thing is that I'm doing in my 9 to 5. So whatever I'm going to do on the side, I want to be passionate about. So that first direction that women go when they're trying to find their niche, it's follow my passion, follow your passion, right? And then the other direction is more internal, but it is also disconnected. And that one is, and this is probably the second most popular place that people go to find their niche, and that is to pick something that's profitable. And the thing about it is neither one of those gives you what you need. It might give you what you want, but it doesn't give you what you need. And what you need is clarity that you can build on. So everything starts with clarity, right? Well, the second part is clarity. The first part is really understanding why you're even doing this in the first place. But clarity is a very close second. And the fact of the matter is, passion without structure, it leads to inconsistency. So yes, you can have something and do something that you're passionate about, but if there's no structure around it, it's going to be inconsistent. I'm not knocking passion projects, because if you have been with me over the last 3 weeks for Nick at Noon, I hope that you can see and you can feel exactly how passionate I am about my niche of helping women use their skills, their existing skills, to create online businesses alongside their 9 to 5 without the burnout, the overwhelm, and without the hustle culture. I hope you can feel that. So I'm not saying that, you can't do something that you're passionate about. What I'm saying is your passion has to have structure around it. Otherwise, it's going to be inconsistent. And then that second direction, I'm just going to pick something that's profitable. Profit without alignment, it leads to burnout, period. And instead of starting with what sounds good or what looks good on paper, I teach my clients to start with what's real. Yes, we talk about passions. Yes, we talk about profit, but what's the real deal here? And the real thing is your experience, it's your exposure, it's your patterns, it's your results, it's your skills, because you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from recognition, and being able to recognize all that's within you is already a business. So, when it comes to choosing your niche, the first place we looked, remember at the beginning, I said I was going to give you 4 places to start to really drill in and identify your niche. This is the first one. So, if you're taking notes, when it comes to choosing your niche, the first place we look is your lived experience. Number one is your lived experience. And I want you to approach this differently than you probably have before, because I don't want you to just write down a list of things you've been through. I want you to start to look at your lived experience as a series of moments where your understanding has changed. Because your experience isn't valuable just because it happened. That's not what makes your experience valuable. What makes your experience valuable is that you understand your experience. Okay? So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. 2 women can go through the same situation. One woman, she moves through whatever the situation is without even processing it. She's just, going through the flow, going through the motion. She's just going through it, right? The other woman, she takes the time to figure out what happened. She takes the time to figure out what she learned from it. And she also took the time to figure out how she'd explain it to someone else and how she would approach it now that she's been through it. How would she approach it differently? Those are 2 very different ways to go through a life experience. And the second woman who took the time to figure out what happened, to really understand what they've learned from it, how they'd explain it, and how they would approach it differently, the second woman, she has something that's transferable. So what I'm saying is, when you think about your own life, I want you to ask a different set of questions when it comes to lived experience. And if you're taking notes, this is something else you might want to write down. If you're watching the replay, just rewind it and go back. The first question is, where have I developed language around something that used to confuse me? Where have I developed language around something that used to confuse me? Where am I clear on? What is it that I'm clear on now that I wasn't clear on before? The second question is, where do I have clarity now that I didn't have clarity before? And then the third question is, where can I explain something in a way that would have helped me before? Because the thing about these 3 questions is what feels obvious to you now, it wasn't always obvious. And that's what I call earned clarity. Like, you earned the privilege to be clear on these things. And that earned clarity is what people pay for. Okay? All right. All right. Thanks for joining on YouTube. I see the love. So, okay, here's something else that happens here that I want you to catch. I don't want you to miss this. And if you're like me and most high achieving women, you've probably normalized many parts of your growth experience. You've just normalized it. Like, this is the thing that I do. Yeah, I did it. You made certain parts of your growth feel smaller than what it is. You've told yourself, you know what, that's just something I had to figure out. That's just something I do. And you're right, it is. You did have to figure it out. You do go through it. But the thing about that is when you normalize it, you also miss the fact that there are people who are still trying to figure out the thing that you already figured out how to do. And what feels obvious to you is often the exact thing someone else is struggling to understand. So, no, you don't lack value. You lack language for the value that you have. And once you start putting language to it and you put structure around it and you start to put context within it, everything starts to shift. That was a message for my high achieving women because we just normalize we normalize our lives altogether, right? Like this is just what it is. This is just what we do. And now I want you to hear something that most women completely overlook when they're choosing their niche. And this is the second thing, that is your professional proximity. So number one was lived experience. Number two is professional proximity. Because you don't have to be the expert in the room to understand what's broken in the room. I'm going to say that one again. You do not have to be the expert in the room to understand what's broken in the room. Proximity creates perspective, and perspective is what people pay for. So take a moment as you're doing this audit and think about the environments you've been in. Think about the roles you've held. Think about the industries that you have been exposed to. Hello, hello, hello. Thanks so much for joining on YouTube. I see you. Think about the conversations that you've been a part of. You have seen things up close that other women are still struggling to figure out from the outside. Maybe you've watched how decisions get made, or you've seen where things start to fall apart. And the thing is, you've noticed what works, not just in theory, but in practice. And even if you weren't the one leading the strategy or leading the project, you were close enough to it to understand it. And that matters. Because most people are still trying to build whatever the thing is from observation at a distance. And you've had access, and access creates awareness. And there is a level of discernment that comes from that close proximity and that level of exposure. And that discernment is you start to understand what deserves attention and what doesn't. You start to understand what moves things forward and what things get left behind. You start to understand what looks important, but it doesn't really change anything, right? You start to understand, you know what, this vanity situation over here, that doesn't even really matter. And that discernment is incredibly valuable in coaching. Incredibly valuable in coaching. Because people just don't need more information. We have enough information. In fact, I would say that in this day and time, we are in an information overload. Information overload. We can go to Google for anything. We have our smartphones in our pocket that we pull out and we go to any of our preferred AI platforms to get what? More information. We're watching TV. We're listening to podcasts. Like, we have so much information. So people don't just need more information. They need someone who can help them filter through all the information that's coming at them. They need someone who can help them see what truly matters. So again, when you're thinking about your niche, don't limit yourself to what you've been formally responsible for. I want you to look at what you understand because you've been close enough. That proximity, that distance between you and the thing, you've been close enough to see it clearly. Number one, lived experience. Number two is professional proximity. Now, let's talk about something that tends to show up even more quietly, but it's very consistent when you're choosing your niche. And this is number three, pattern recognition. And this is where your thinking becomes visible. What you think in pattern recognition, it actually becomes visible because patterns are proof that what you know isn't just random. So within this framework of pattern recognition, I want you to ask yourself a series of questions. And if you're taking notes, again, you can write this down. The first question is, what do people come to me for, even if it's informal? What's the thing that people are constantly asking you about? The second question is, what do you find yourself explaining more than once, over and over and over again? We're talking about the patterns in your life here. We're talking about the patterns of people coming to you for whatever the thing is. We're talking about the thing that you explain all the time. The third question is, what do you hear and immediately understand, even when someone else is still trying to piece it all together? What is that thing? Because coaching, having a coaching business at its core is pattern recognition. It is the ability to hear something once and understand what's underneath it. Coaching is the ability to recognize that when what someone is describing to you, that isn't necessarily the root of the issue. Good coaching is the ability to connect dots that haven't been connected yet. And when you can do that consistently, people literally feel it. Like they feel you. They might not have a language for it, but they feel understood. And there's a moment that tends to happen in conversations. When someone is explaining their situation and walking you through what's going on, and then somewhere in the middle of it, you see it, you understand it, you can already tell where this is going. And when you reflect it back to them, they pause. And they might say something like, you know what, I've never thought about it like that before. And that right there, that is the moment that matters. Because what felt simple to you just shifted something for them. And perspective is not small. Perspective literally creates movement. Thanks so much for the love on YouTube. I see you. Perspective creates movement. Someone dropped that in the chat, matter of fact. Somebody dropped movement down in the chat. Movement, because perspective, out of all of the four things, they're all important. Okay. But if I had to rank them, I would say perspective is probably the most important. And it's probably the one that makes most new and aspiring coaches the most uncomfortable. Because you might have to ruffle some feathers. It means that you're going against the grain. It means that you're saying things that maybe not everybody else is saying, and that's okay. Now, we've already talked about three things and three areas that you can audit to help you find your niche. And number one was your lived experience. Number two was your professional proximity. And we just finished talking about your pattern recognition. Now I want you to give you the fourth area that you can audit to help you to find your niche. And this one is a little bit more tangible. And that's your results. But I want you to expand how you might define what your results are. Because if you're only looking for paid client outcomes, you're going to miss a lot when it comes to results. And the thing about it is your results are not limited to just formal experiences. Remember, I asked you to drop movement in the chat. It doesn't only have to do with your pattern recognition and your perspective, but it also has to do with your results because your results are evidence of that movement. They're the proof that something has changed. It's data, it's analytics. Your results are proof that something improved. It's proof that something became clearer, more effective, more aligned. So when you're auditing these 4 areas, I want you to look at your own life. Where can you point to a before and an after, a clear before and after? At what point in your life did something shift for you in a measurable way? What decisions did you make that led to a different outcome? What systems did you create that made something easier? These are things that I want you to look at when we're talking about results. And even beyond your own life, where have you influenced someone else's outcome? Even in the conversations that weren't labeled coaching, because those moments still count. They still show that your perspective, it actually leads somewhere. It leads to a result. And the fact of the matter is they're not going to invest in your idea. They're not, more than likely, when it comes to your coaching business, but they will invest in the outcome. They will invest in the result. So now when you take all of these 4 areas that I am suggesting, and if you were my client, I would take you through to audit to find your niche. I'm going to just go ahead and recap them real quick for anybody that's taking notes. The first one was your lived experience. The second one is your proximity, your professional proximity. The third area is your pattern recognition. And the fourth pattern we just finished talking about, and that is your results. So when you take all of this together, you start to see something a little more clearly. You start to see your niche start to emerge. You don't just see isolated strengths. You shouldn't just see isolated strengths. But at this point, you should start to see some intersections. And your niche lives within those intersections. It's not just one thing, it's the overlap of those 4 things. Does that make sense? It's the overlap of those 4 things. Your niche is where your experience meets your understanding, right? It's an overlap. It's where your exposure meets your insight. And it's where your patterns meet your results. And that's what's going to make your niche specific. It's what makes your niche real, and it's what makes your niche yours. And this is a moment I want you to pause, just for take a beat, because hearing this and actually seeing it are 2 completely different things. So what I want you to do is, instead of moving quickly past this, I want you to sit with this one question. Where in your life have you already created clarity that someone else is still searching for? And I want you to answer this question not in a general sense, but in a very specific and tangible way. Because clarity doesn't come from thinking longer and studying long and studying wrong. It comes from seeing things differently. So when you start to put all this together, it's just as important to understand what not to build your niche around. So I just spent, I don't know, maybe the last 20 or 30 minutes talking about the 4 areas that you should audit to build your niche around. But I also want to talk about what not to build your niche around, because this part is where I see so many women get pulled off track. Because passion, I said this earlier, and I talked about it for a little bit earlier, passion is often positioned as the starting point. And while passion can support your work, it does not define your niche. Somebody drop passion in the chat. While passion can support your work and support your business, it does not define your niche. Because the fact is, you can be passionate about something and still not be able to teach it clearly. Remember earlier I said that passion without structure, it just leads to confusion. And because you're interested in it, it doesn't automatically translate to impact. And if you build your niche around something that you're interested in just by itself, right? Like, I'm interested in AI, which is true, very interested in AI, but I'm not an AI coach. Because if I built my niche around interest alone, I would end up with messaging that feels good to me, but it doesn't land for the person that I'm trying to reach because I'm interested in it, right? I'm not committed to it. And that's the same that goes for trends. And I can use AI as a trend. It's a very trending topic, and I'm seeing more people teaching and training and coaching and consulting about AI than I see for anything else right now. So it's trendy, and trying to build your business based on something that's popular right now, that is how you end up creating something you don't even want to sustain. You don't want to sustain it. And I've had personal experience with that when I started my coaching business. I did it on public speaking. I was a public speaking coach. I had programs around public speaking. I took very many women, dozens and dozens of women through my programs, my group coaching programs, and my one on one programs around public speaking. It's popular. I was interested in it. I'm good at it, but I didn't sustain it. I didn't want to sustain it. And that's because trends require constant adjustment. They require constant attention, and it leads to constant comparison. And what that does is it doesn't create stability, it doesn't create scalability, it creates pressure, and it goes against everything that I teach at Her Income Edit. It goes against everything that I teach here. And then there's looking at what other people are doing and trying to find your place within that. This is what we're not building our niche around, okay? Because someone else's structure is not your starting point. Their path was built on their experiences. You can be inspired by other people, okay? You can even lean into them and pick their brain and use them as case studies for which to build your business on. But their business was built on their experiences, on their perspective and their patterns. And trying to reverse engineer that into your own business, it usually feels and it leads to misalignment. So if you've already chosen a niche and something feels off, there are usually signs. And those signs look like your messaging, it feels harder than it should. It should feel very natural. It should feel like a conversation. You find yourself rewriting things over and over and over again. You keep going to your website and second guessing everything that's there. And it feels like you're trying to make whatever the thing is you're doing, you're trying to make it sound right. Another sign is your content feels like you're reaching for ideas instead of speaking from clarity. Yeah, another sign is you're showing up, but when you're showing up, it just doesn't feel anchored. And all of that is not a consistency problem. Like, you can show up all day, every day, 5 times a week at noon, but if your showing up doesn't feel anchored, if you're not speaking from clarity, if you're constantly feeling like your messaging is harder than it should be, that is not a consistency problem, y'all. It's a clarity problem. And more effort does not fix misalignment, it just makes the misalignment more visible. It puts a magnifying glass on misalignment. So, I want to give you a simple way to check yourself for this. Real easy. So if somebody came to you right now, literally right now, with a situation and asked for your help, would you feel grounded in what you would guide them? Do you feel grounded in that? Do you feel grounded in how you would guide them? And You don't feel grounded because you have every answer, but because you understand the landscape. You understand where to start and you understand what matters. Because that right there, that is going to help you along your way. Because at the end of the day, your audience can feel the difference between someone who is just toying with and exploring an idea and someone who has already spent time understanding it. I keep hearing the term trust recession in this space over and like it's everybody's talking about a trust recession. In my opinion, I have always been in a trust recession my whole life. And the trust recession is where consumers are just, they don't trust people. They're not trusting products. They're not trusting companies. They're not trusting coaches. They're not trusting consultants the way that they used to. So that means they're not buying into their programs, their products, and their services as I hesitate to use the word easily, but as easily as they did in like 2017 and 2018 and during COVID, right? So we have this trust recession. And I will say that I believe that audiences and consumers are definitely much more savvy when it comes to making their purchases. They're doing more due diligence, they're doing more research. They want to make sure that whatever the thing is that they buy or whoever it is that they invest in, that they truly understand them. But if you're here and you're just exploring an idea and you're like, you know what, I have this idea that I'm interested in. I'm going to use AI again because I am interested in AI. I'm interested in it, and I have the idea that I want to create a product around teaching AI, and I'm just exploring it. If I got on here Monday through Friday at noon and I started, having these conversations around AI, y'all would be able to feel it. You would be able to feel, you know what, she doesn't really know too much about AI because your perception and your insight into what is credible and the results, I wouldn't have it. And you'd be able to see right through it. And the fact is, once you have clarity around whatever the thing is, everything else starts to connect. It does. Your content becomes more focused because you're not trying to say everything at once. Like you're focused on the thing. Your offers, your programs, your products, and your services become more intentional because they're built on clear transformation. Your messaging becomes more effective because it's rooted in something real. I'm interested in AI. And at some point, I might have enough experience with it that I can help someone get from point A to point B. But right now, that's not what it is. And the thing about it is your confidence starts to shift when you know and you take these steps in auditing your niche and it feels good. Your confidence shifts when you know that you have results, when you know you have lived experience, when you know that you have perspective. And it's not because you're trying to convince yourself. It's because you can clearly see the alignment. Confidence built on clarity, it feels different, y'all, because it doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be true. It just needs to be true. And so here's where I want to leave you and what I want you to take away from all this. I've said a lot, right? This will be on my YouTube channel and you can watch the replay at any time. So, but the main thing that I want you to take away from all this is you are closer to your niche than you think. And it's not because your niche is obvious. It's because your niche is familiar. Remember the 4 areas: your lived experience, your professional proximity, your results, and your pattern recognition. Your niche isn't obvious, but it's familiar. It's familiar because those 4 areas are familiar. And familiarity is what makes things super easy to overlook. I talked a little bit earlier about how high achieving women, we just normalize everything we do in our lives. We normalize managing our household. We normalize being able to lead our organizations. We normalize every aspect of our life. And familiarity and normalization, it makes things super easy to overlook. So instead of searching for something new when it comes to your niche, I want you to start by recognizing what's already there. Audit those 4 areas for me. And I want you to start by giving weight to the things you've learned, giving weight to the patterns you've seen, and giving weight to the clarity that you've developed, because that is the foundation of your niche. It's the foundation of your online business. And if you're at the point where you can see pieces of your niche, but you're still not sure how to organize it or how to turn it into something structured, clear, and something you can build on, that right there is exactly what I walk you through inside of the Blueprint Advantage mini course. Because at some point, you've got to stop circling around your potential and you have to start to structure it. That's the only way that you're going to start a coaching business. That's the only way you're going to build a business online. Clarity without structure, it doesn't build anything. And if you're serious about turning what you already know into something that creates income, something that positions you to grow and scale, the Blueprint Advantage is your next step. If you're watching on YouTube, the description or the link for the Blueprint Advantage is in the description, or you can visit my website at herincomeedit.com. And here's the thing. More than anything, I want you to walk away from this discussion on this Strategy Tuesday with an understanding of one thing. And I want you to understand this clearly. You are not starting from scratch. You are starting from recognition. And once you can see that recognition, then you can start to build on it. Okay? I see I have a few people still with me. I have a few minutes if y'all have any questions about any of the content that I covered today, about defining your niche. Do you need clarity around anything? Just drop it in the chat. I have a few minutes around it. But like I said, more than anything, just know that you are not starting from scratch. And those 4 areas that I am suggesting that you audit in order to find your niche, that is a step that, in my opinion, it just can't be skipped. And like I said, passion is, it's a place to start. But what about your pattern recognition? Let's really get into the areas of our lives that would really anchor our business so that it can be sustainable, so that it can be stable, and so that it can be scalable. Thank you, RCO303. I appreciate you for joining. So if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. And remember, this space, this online business space, and you see it all the time, online coaches and consultants and digital products and content creators, all like, it's real. And it can be real for you, but you have to have the structure around it. And in my experience, I have had to hire folks to help me navigate through some of these things. And that's what Her Income Edit is for. And I'm not the coach who is going to tell you to quit your job today and burn it all to the ground and chase your dreams. Because that rarely works. I say it all the time. We have bills to pay, right? We have mortgages and car notes and tuition and vacations, and things are not getting easier out in these streets. What? They are not getting easier. I traveled this weekend and I felt personally the effects of TSA not being paid. So this whole thing for me is all about helping women have options, not quit your job and go chase your dream. If that's what you want to do, that's great. But that's not necessarily what I teach. What I teach here is to build something stable, sustainable, and scalable on the side. So it gives you options. So that if your company decides that they're going to stop paying you, furlough you, or you get laid off, you have something here that you can build upon. Matter of fact, not even just build upon it, but grow it, right? So I don't see any questions, and at this point, I'm just kind of rambling. I appreciate y'all for joining. I will be here tomorrow for Wednesday, Money Making Wednesday. We'll be talking about money tomorrow. So I will be right here on YouTube live at noon. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.